Okay, Chairman, it's 5 o'clock, just to let you know the recording has begun.
Can't hear the recording, Amy. Can anybody else hear the recording?
No, I don't think it's given us a verbal update there, but it is showing on my screen as the organiser that it is recording, so we're okay to start.
Well, I don't know whether it's good afternoon or good evening, but because it's dark, I'll say good evening and welcome everybody. Prior to the commencement of the business of the committee, may I remind everyone present that the meeting will be recorded via the internet and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hands up? But in this case, can you just speak, because I can't see everybody on screen to know if you want to speak. If anybody has any difficulty hearing or being heard, then they should let Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should be turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they at least can hear and be heard. Thank you all very much. Agenda item 1 for Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday the 8th of December 2020 at 5 p.m. Do you have any apologies for absence?
None received from myself, Chair.
Thank you, I have none. Agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of November 2020. Would you like me to do it page by page, or would you like it moved on block?
Move on block, Chair.
Move on block. Yeah, move the minutes.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest, including whipping declarations. Do we have any? No? Any declarations of interest? No, good. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is the report of the Director of Social Services. This report is for noting. It comes to this committee on an annual basis, and Rachel Evans and Angela Harris will take us through the recommendations, which are to continue to have regular reports. Rachel, Angela, which one of you are going to speak to the report?
Hello, Chair. We'll go straight to Angela, if that's okay. It's much easier, I think, to have a single voice this evening.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Welcome, Angela.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Here we are again. This is in a different format. This is actually the 5th annual report to committee on the collaborative, which is incredible, really. I don't know where that time has gone. This report covers the period up to the 31st of March this year, so it's last year's report. But as previously, it tends to be reported at this time of year. But I am conscious that members may have questions about more recent developments, which I'll attempt to answer. I think the report is fairly self-explanatory and is principally structured around our governance arrangements and service functions. I suppose in terms of our overall service development during the year, the region benefited considerably from the 2.3 million that was awarded by Welsh Government to improve adoption support in Wales. We had a significant proportion of the grant because of our size, and we were able to recruit to 2.5 social work specialist posts within the collaborative and 2 unqualified posts. And then part of the money was used to fund 10.5 posts in local authorities to support life journey work. So these are significant developments for the collaborative. And obviously, I can touch on a bit more detail about what's involved in those new developments. In terms of governance of the region, it's remained the same format, although Management Board now meets on a quarterly basis, and the Management Board is chaired by one of the directors, and it was agreed that because of the move to quarterly meetings, then that should be the chairing of the management board should rotate every 3 years. So that's now been agreed. And Lance has recently taken over the chairing of our management board. The operational group, which is a fairly new tier in our governance arrangements, was established in the year previous, but I think during this period has become much more embedded into our structure. It provides an opportunity for senior managers in the local authorities with lead responsibility for adoption to meet with VVC managers. And, you know, its overall function is to try and improve practice consistency and, you know, to try and, improve consistency across the region. And obviously to look at our performance in key areas, particularly those where we've got a joint responsibility. In terms of the joint committee, that met twice during the year, and obviously that committee has the function of approving our budget, approving our plan. And at the end of the year, we did have an underspend in the budget that was created largely by the grant monies. And it was agreed by Management Board and Joint Committee that that would be retained by the collaborative this year to assist in improving our IT capability, and obviously to increase our support services to adopters. And at that time, obviously, to look at whether we would need some additional staff resource to actually manage our service delivery plan following COVID. In terms of our overall performance, as a region, we're required to report on 50+ performance indicators to the National Adoption Service, and those do increase year on year. We did have a raft of new indicators that were put in place in April, but in terms of the new stage, the two-stage development, the two-stage assessment of adopters, but those have been put on hold at the moment because of the easement that Welsh Government have given us in terms of the regulations. But that is a significant part of our work in terms of reporting on our performance, and we've had to develop our systems to ensure that we have that and we're able to meet that reporting function. Just some key points in terms of our service areas. In terms of family finding, I think the region saw a decrease in children's referrals, and obviously the decrease in referrals has a knock-on effect in terms of other aspects, principally a reduction in placement orders. During this period, there was a 30% reduction in placement orders from the previous year. This wasn't just peculiar to our region. This was part of a national trend, and I think obviously reflects the commitment that local authority has to reduce lack numbers, to pursue alternative forms of permanency for children. So that was a significant development, and it's something that certainly we've been monitoring very closely this year. But certainly at this stage in the year, placement orders are now increasing. On a positive note, we were able to place 101 children for adoption last year, which is, I think, 1% up on the year before. But also aligned to that we saw a significant reduction in the numbers waiting at year end. And I think, you know, towards the end of the reporting period, we were beginning to see the evidence of the positive impact of the new workers, certainly within our family finding team. We've been able to, as a result of the new monies, recruit a transitions worker and a life journey work coordinator. And those posts are really key in improving transitions work for children moving into placement, and for being able to improve the provision of life journey work for children where there's a plan for adoption. The Life Journey Work Life Journey Work Coordinator is now working closely with the staff within the local authority teams to improve performance, and we are beginning to see that performance is increasing, which are obviously very positive developments. And just before we just move on, I think again we've seen fortunately that the level of disruption of placements remains fairly low, which is a good point, really good sign. In terms of recruitment and assessment, we were able to further develop the marketing and recruitment strategy that we'd started in the previous year following the appointment of our marketing officer. Our marketing officer was actually made a permanent employee during this period because I think we've acknowledged that that is now very much part of services going forward. And in fact, the model that we developed within VBC has now been replicated throughout all the other regions in Wales, so everybody has a marketing officer. The strategy, I think, was really twofold. We were able to raise our profile by attendance at a range of events during the year, but we've also had to also develop our profile via social media, and that has now really come into the fore during this year when we haven't been able to attend physical events, but we're now very much using Facebook and Instagram to actually regularly advertise, the need for adopters, and that is having, dividends really. Our inquiries increased and have continued to increase, and we were successful in actually presenting 75 households for approvals to panel, and 69 of those were ratified in the period, which was a 35% increase. So that is a significant, positive development. The other obviously main area of our service is around adoption support, and this has continued to grow year on year. It has received a great national focus, and this has had an impact at a regional level. And obviously the posts and the funding are about improving our overall adoption support service from the initial stages right through to children being adopted. So we've seen an increase in referrals, but I think we've also been able to increase the range of support that we can offer families in terms of our own specialist training that we're now able to develop within house, and that then has a knock-on effect in terms of the number of children that we have to refer to local authorities for external funding packages. We were able to recruit to a post to actually service the TESA service, which is a national service developed by Adoption UK to actually offer support at quite an early stage, a low level, to families. And we, within our region, have been the highest region to refer into that service. So the TESA coordinator has been very active in terms of supporting that service at a national level. We've also recruited for Children and Young Persons Coordinator, which again is another new post for us. That post is very much aligned to the Connected service, which is a service for children and young people who are adopted, and that offers group and individual support. Again, that is operated by Adoption UK, but our and workers in other regions actually provide direct support into those groups. So our Children and Young Persons Coordinator has been very active in that respect. That person also works directly with young people referred into the service, providing additional support, and also supporting some of our direct contact arrangements, because we've actually got a number of those, and those are increasing. So in terms of, so those are the sort of key points really in terms of the report. I think the remainder of the report, we have a section on obviously adoption panel activity. That's still a busy area for us. We have 4 panels a month, and as you can see from the report and the appendix, there's a lot of traffic, a lot of work goes through that function. Obviously, in terms of complaints and compliments, I think fortunately we had a fairly low level of complaints last year, lower than in previous years. But obviously we're actively dealing with those. We're also trying to get better at monitoring and recording the compliments that we receive, because we do, the nature of our business, we do receive quite positive feedback. We're also now developing different ways of evaluating our service. We have an evaluation form that we give out to new potential recruits following adopter training, and we are now trying to also evaluate some of the outcomes of our adoption support services, particularly around TESA and referrals into the service. So that is an area for development. I mean, there's also a lot of national work around adoption support in terms of evaluating adopter responses. So we have to be careful that we don't overload adoptive families with too many evaluations and questionnaires, etc. So that's the report. I think again the appendices to the report, I think hopefully are fairly self-explanatory, and they cover the key functions, and there's also an appendix in relation to panel activity. So I'll stop at the moment just in case.
Thank you, Angela. That was very interesting and very informative. I have Councillor Neil Thomas with his hand up. Would like to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Angela. It is a very comprehensive report and generally very good. I mean, the bit about the compliments that came up in JCF. John consulted the forum the other day, and the need to pass those compliments on and generally make them known was noted in terms of staff morale. They all get to hear the whines and the whinges, but the pats on the back are vitally important to the staff. I was surprised that the numbers of referrals have actually, you say, have gone down this year. I was kind of expecting a massive rise due to the pressures of family circumstances with COVID. Can I ask though about? I mean, it's good, and it's good that you're getting so few complaints as well. Can I ask about the stability of the adoptions and whether we've seen any change in adoption breakdown or fragility of them, please?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of referrals last year, children's referrals were down, but they have increased certainly from Q2 this year. We saw a bit of a dip in Q1, but certainly we're seeing children's referrals. That's the children who are referred into the service where there's a potential plan for adoption. So they've increased. In terms of adoption support, again, Q1 this year, we had a dip, but we've seen quite a big increase in Q2. I think we've found that families in Q1 this year, probably with the lockdown, they almost either tended to get on with it more, really. But certainly Q2, we've seen an increase, and that could be partly attributed to children return to school, etc., increased pressures, etc. But in terms of disruption levels, again, they were fairly low last year, and I'm not aware. I mean, I can double check, but we haven't had any disruptions so far this year, fortunately. We did, obviously in Q1 this year, we did place very few children, but again in Q2 that has now increased because there's a nationally developed risk assessment process that has been put in place that we have to comply with, and that it's meant the placements are taking longer, introductions take longer, all the process, because obviously we've got to put in place those safeguards. But things are increasing, and certainly court activity is increasing as well. I hope that answers your question. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I know that Rachel wants to come in. I know it's something that she's very passionate about. Rachel?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Angela, for once again, as always, a very comprehensive, interesting, update on all of it. And, I can't thank you enough for being so detailed. I'm just wanting to ask about the National Adoption Week that took place. I think it was October. I really loved the theme. I think it was called Truth Be Told, something like that, wasn't it? I'm just wondering if there was any specific feedback for the Vale of Glamorgan, and did we have any sort of service user representation? I think I think it's great that it was even put out there, but I'm just wondering, what the outcomes were really of this, and if we're looking to roll it out again.
I think yes, you're right. I think it was obviously we'd had National Adoption Week the year before, but there's one just gone very recently.
Yeah.
The in terms of the outcomes of the Vale, we're still evaluating that.
Okay.
But we've had quite a presence in National Adoption Week, because we had two other part of National Adoption Week this year. For the first time, they developed adoption podcasts, and two of families from VVC were featured as part of those podcasts, which are really good. There's also been some research. Other people saw it last week on the news, on the BBC Live programme and news, and that was a VVC adopter that was presented on that. But in terms of, because obviously National Adoption Week this year was all digital.
Yeah.
Then we've had some feedback from Cowshed, which is the organisation that works very closely with NAS in the regions in developing our marketing.
Yeah.
But I haven't got the specific data in terms of our region as yet.
Okay.
I can get that.
Lovely.
If, we can get some, some feedback on how it goes for us, really, if that, if members are interested in that.
I would be very interested,
Yes,
Angela. I mean, it's in terms of obviously future planning and
Yes.
and all of your desired outcomes, really. Do we have, and this may be some sort of thought process here needed, but do we have a sort of an adopter ambassador here in the Vale of Glamorgan, somebody that we could use, really pivotal to our message here in the Vale? Is that something that you would consider?
Yeah, it's actually something that NAS have developed. There is an ambassador program.
Great.
And we have got a couple of adopters that are part of that. But in terms of one specifically for the Vale, I mean, that's something we could develop. But we're often asked to put forward an adopter, either to speak with the media or to be involved in a bit of project work or something. So so that is definitely something that's been developed, on an ambassador program.
Lovely.
And we've got a number of we've also got quite a group that we're now working with, of Welsh speaking adopters, where we're trying to actually improve adoption support materials, etc., through the medium of Welsh for those. So we've got an active group of those as well. So yes, so there are people out there, definitely.
It's successful in England, Angela. That's why I'm saying it.
Yeah, it is.
It is a pivotal person. This is somebody that they can, and it doesn't. I mean, obviously, I prefer it to be a service user representative, but it could be, It could be a you know, somebody that's, you know, perhaps even a bit famous, you know, who's perhaps had some involvement with some services. Just a thought, but yeah, that's
No, I
something I
think
would
it's
love
right.
to
I
bring
think
to
it's a
bear.
very relevant thought, and it's one that is very much in line with
Yeah.
you know, national thinking, really.
Yeah, lovely. And just two observations, really. The transitional workers, having sat on the panel, you know, for some time now, that is such a statutory element. It is incredible, and that I'm so pleased that that's now in place, because it can break down purely because that transition worker. So
definitely.
I'm so pleased to hear that. And I think this is another positive, really. But it's funny that the increase has actually seemed to be mitigated by the dynamics of working in. So there's some silver lining here, isn't there? You know, it does see, I don't know what, you know, it just seems to have, the balance has shifted and we seem to be levelling up now, which is just, again, it's really good to hear. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Angela. Griffiths, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's no question other than to note, obviously within my day job, there's no conflict, but my day job will contribute to some of the figures of the collaborative that's been presented in this report tonight, so I just want that noted.
Oh, thank you, Owen. Councillor Julie Aviett, did you have a question?
Yes, I have. I'd just like to ask Angela, what's the most common age for children to be adopted? And also, at what age do they leave adoption? Is it down to the adoptive parents, or have we got anything in place for when they have to leave? Thank you.
I would say, I mean, the most common age is 2 to 4, 5. That's the most common. I mean, we have had more babies this year. We have had quite a number of babies. The legal age for the end of adoption is 18. But certainly, like services like Connected, they're now looking at you know, extended support services, but legally the cutoff is 18. You know, so that's
Just to add to that, Councillor Aviett, I don't know whether you were thinking that the adoption arrangement ended. It isn't. No. The arrangement ends. That becomes your family. So the children that never leave and the children that return that we'll all experience is exactly the same in adoption. There are opportunities, obviously, for children who've been adopted to seek out their birth family, but an adoptive family becomes your forever family, and legally the adoption order gives parental responsibility to the adoptive parents, removes it from the local authority, and removes it from the parent, if that makes sense. So you're a child of that family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Jane Norman, did you have a question you wanted to ask? Councillor Jane Norman, is she with us?
Chair, I don't think that is actually Councillor Norman, because she's not actually with us in the meeting at the moment, so I'm not quite sure why it's displaying. I'm not sure if...
I didn't think she was on this committee, actually.
No, it's rather strange. Me and Mark have clocked that. But just to let you know, there isn't anybody else for that at the moment.
Okay, I've just got one question. How many breakdowns of adoptions do you have within those figures?
I think there were 2 last year.
Right.
So it is fairly low, fortunately.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, 2 placements last year.
Thank you. Well, the recommendation is that we approve to continue having the regular reports. Is everybody in favour? Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Right, moving on to agenda item 5. This, I know we've had an awful lot of reading to do for this meeting this evening. This is the day services report, which started on the day services started on the 18th of November and is for information only. I presume we've all read it. Does anybody have any questions for Lance? No. Did you want to say anything, Lance?
Not especially, I suppose. I just wanted to thank you as chair of this committee for allowing us to use the urgent procedures so that we could start to open the service. And I suppose the only thing I was going to really stress was that the opening of the service is being done on a very gradual basis. So it's by no means a return to normal.
I think it's wonderful. Thank you, Lance. I think having been a carer myself for a period of time, I can only really appreciate how wonderful this is for carers, especially at home. So that's agenda 5, which is for information only. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is the annual report which we receive every 6 months and is for noting. Does anybody have any questions on it? Lance, have you got anything you'd like to say?
I suppose it's hugely important work, and it's important work particularly for social services. Obviously, safeguarding is a core of the work we do. Because of COVID-19, we would usually have done an annual report and then done a 6-month update. The annual report is behind, and so we've combined that with the 6-month update. So the 6-month update essentially is within the text of the report, and then the annual report is attached at the appendix. But I think it shows a good number of positive approaches that we are engaged with corporately.
Yeah, I could see that. Does anybody have any questions? No. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7. This report is for consultation and consideration. The recommendations from us, they would like to have the opportunity to feed anything that we feel should be included or should be asked. So Lance, would you like to present this report?
Yeah, I suppose obviously it's attached, but this has been developed through a series of detailed discussions with the senior leadership team, and I think it reflects very much how our services are changing, and I think what you'll be aware that we have a requirement to set out our annual improvement objectives, so we have to do that, but I think what we see within the ADP is a reflection of the complexity and breadth of services delivered across the council. Clearly, some elements of this are more relevant to us in terms of the individual objectives than others, and the work of this committee. And I think that's probably quite evident when you look through which ones they are. So I suppose we welcome feedback from the committee regarding the draft plan. All feedback from that consultation exercise will be considered and reported to Cabinet and Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee in February.
Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to highlight, there is a administrative error on page 6 on paragraph 2.10. It refers to Cabinet approving the draft for September 2021. So that obviously is just a date error. It should read September 2020.
Thank you, Amy. Does anybody have any input they'd like for this report, or any more questions they'd like to ask Lance? No? Thank you, Lance. Moving on to, so is everybody happy to move the recommendations? Yep. All in favour? Thank you. Moving on then to agenda 8. We've already discussed this previously. It's a rolling report. So are there any questions, and can we note and move the recommendations? Are there any questions? No. Can we move and note the recommendations then, please? Thank you. Agenda item 9, 10 and 11. These are the budget reports. 9, Caroline will be presenting. It's a budget report looking at the previous period of the 1st of April to the 30th of September.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
brought. Yes, so the report is up to the end of September. The first part of the report looks at the revenue position. At this time of the year, we look to revise the revenue budget, but purely for technical accounting adjustments and any recharges or changes in between departments. So the change in the budget that's shown as Appendix 1 is the revised budget, but it doesn't actually change the bottom line, or it doesn't actually change any variances that are reported for this committee. As I say, it's just a sort of a technical tidy up. The position on the report for revenue is the same as last month, so we're saying it's 1.5 million over. This is in adult services, 500,000 being relating to additional payments that we made to staff, frontline workforce staff, as part of a sort of recompense for working during the COVID pandemic. We did try to claim this from Welsh Government, as I said previously, but Welsh Government wasn't going to fund it for us because they said it was a local decision. The other £1 million is on the care packages, but I'd just like to point out that the care package budget is very volatile. It's very difficult, and I think again this year it's normally a difficult exercise to try to predict, and it's even more difficult with everything going on this year. So we will be, keeping we're monitoring it very closely, and we'll be reporting any changes on that as we go through the year. The savings target is outlined in Appendix 2, and at this point in time we are anticipating those savings targets will be achieved. The report then goes on to outline capital changes that have been agreed since the last capital report was brought to this committee. There have been a few changes, but they're detailed in the report. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any, please.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Can we note the progress being made through the recovery service? Oh, yeah, okay. I move the 4 recommendations. Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10. The money side going forward with the accounts for 2021 to be considered, and any comments be passed to corporate resources and any other relevant consultees before making a final proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just run very briefly through it. So normally we usually get the provisional settlement from Welsh Government due in October, but this year with everything going on it won't be received until the 22nd of December, so that is very late. However, we can't wait until that time to actually start consulting with everybody on our budgets for next year, because the council tax has to be set by the 11th of March. So this report is brought to you without really knowing what the settlement will be for next year. So what we've done in our medium-term financial plan is we've had to model a few scenarios just to sort of get a range of what the position could look like next year. So we've modelled Welsh Government settlement varying from a reduction of 1%, an increase of 1%, and a cash neutral. We've also looked at council tax, so we've modelled a 4.9% increase, and we've also modelled going to the Welsh average of 8.4% increase next year, and then it would be 4.6% to actually retain it at that level for the next 2 years. So when we look at those scenarios, the shortfall could be at best case scenario 6.8 million and worst case scenario 12.8 million. I say this is a very difficult year because really we really are not clear what the settlement might be. In order to actually get to these figures, we've had to have a look at what the cost pressures are that departments are putting forward. The cost pressures for this committee are outlined in Appendix 1 and total 3.6 million. So the next steps really are for committee to sort of provide any recommendations, perhaps around those cost pressures, that can be forwarded to the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. They will then be fed back to Cabinet so that they will be able to sort of set the budget for next financial year during February. So as I say, the recommendations from this committee would be appreciated if anyone has any comments regarding the cost pressures listed. Thank you.
You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments? No, all read and digested. Yes, Neil?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say it's difficult from the point of view of this directorate to look at cuts in cost pressures, because the cost pressures are most of them are statutory, and the kind of things that we have to do are the minimum funding is pretty much most of what we do. There are one or two sort of areas like leisure and so on where we could perhaps be looking at different levels of finance, but that in the scheme of things is quite a small amount, so that it would be difficult for anyone to actually turn around and say, well, we can cut this, we can cut that, because we can't. We have to do it. It's law. That's the situation. I'm sure Ben will have comments on this as well, but yeah, that's where we're at.
I agree, Neil. It's very difficult to make comments on something that we really don't know what the future holds for us. Ben Gray, Councillor Ben Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And yeah, I think we can all maturely anticipate, the issues there, and we all understand the pressures. I think when we talk of pressures, it's about trying to anticipate as much as we can the level of demand, rather than talking about it in terms of cuts. I think it's in terms of demographic changes to our care needs, the commissioning costs and how much everybody's costs are rising. We look at the cost of the national living wage and other aspects that impact on the care costs. So we obviously know who we're looking after now, but also how does that demographic change, and then what sort of care are we going to have to be commissioning in the future. So yes, you are right in saying, of course, we have to fund these things. At this stage of the budget process, of course, every portfolio holder, every directorate's bringing forward their pressures, but I think it's worth noting how many of our pressures are at that upper end of the cost, and when people look at the sort of level of funding that's needed. It is worth noting, obviously, in previous years, certain grants have come along, and I've talked at this committee before about not being able to land on a particular point in time, and we do have a healthy reserve, but clearly, as some of the papers lay out, we've been needing to use that in this most unprecedented year. So, yeah, absolutely, we're not looking at cost cutting at all. The pressures we're talking about is trying to anticipate the future, and as we can all appreciate and have noted, that's very hard to do. But the assumptions we put in place with regards to the level of fee increase that we could look at has an attached pressure to it, and then that's put into the mix for the overall budget process. But an endorsement of understanding those pressures from the Scrutiny Committee is very, very worthwhile. It helps underpin why we need to look at the budget the way we do. And clearly that there are big things that need to be paid for. But thank you, Neil and Janice, for that, and allow me to just have a brief chat there.
Councillor Owen Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Thomas and Councillor Gray have actually preempted what I was going to suggest in terms of the statutory nature of this directorate. Possibly one question I put forward to Councillor Gray as the lead on this is, how is the directorate best placed to deal with any additional costs that are going to come from this? As we know from legal costs, council costs, etc., and with the COVID-19 situation currently, is the local authority anticipating a rise in unborn or looked after children coming into the directorate over the next couple of months, and will that also add to the cost pressures currently faced by the directorate?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I'll turn to Rachel to give you some detail with regard to children looked after, but certainly some of our headline pressures, when you look across the three services, in adult services around demographic change, and in what we call our RMS, resource management, is around that commissioning cost and the increases. And certainly, yes, we're doing a lot of work to understand the increase in children looked after and the pressure that is having on the system, in order to best support and look after those who are in need. Are we predicting an increase? I don't know that we can predict a level, We've certainly seen an increase in referrals that I'm sure I'll let Rachel talk to those now. And we are, I will go back to talking about the reserves. You know, of the directorates, we have some of the healthiest reserves. So in terms of dealing with emerging practices, that is something we can absolutely deal with. In terms of transferring what we can foresee as an issue into a budget pressure that we're then able to understand as part of our base budget, that's the work that's currently going on, and we're looking very seriously at how we can best manage and support those children who need that support from social workers. But I know Rachel wants to come in with some actual figures to back that up. Is it okay, Chair, if Rachel talks now?
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for the question. We certainly are seeing increases. I'm just trying to pick up the areas that you were interested in. So we certainly are seeing an increase in unborn, newborn children. They are featuring in our court work. So the matters that we're putting before the court are including an increased number in relation to unborn / newborn children. We have seen an increase in our numbers of children looked after. So you may or may not recall it was 259 at the end of March. We were very successful in terms of reducing our numbers in relation to the intentions that we set ourselves. And that number is currently 274. So that rise is there, and it's been a rise associated with new admissions and lots of emergency admissions during the COVID period. We're still seeing flow in the system, so I'd want to assure you that there's still activity in relation to trying to safely reduce those numbers, but it's slower, and the number of admissions is making that more challenging. In terms of contacts at the front door, in the period April to September last year compared to the period April to September this year, we've seen a 33% increase in contacts. That's what we now call referrals into the front door. We anticipated an increase further with the children going back to school, and that rise was 62% compared to September last year. And if we look at an average over September, October, November, those contacts to the front door are averaging 45% compared to last year. We're seeing a huge increase in complexity, so it's never just about number. So that the situations that you can imagine are contributing to that mean that the complexity of the matters that we're dealing with, the families that we're supporting, have increased. And that's partly borne out by higher numbers on the Child Protection Register, higher numbers of proceedings, higher numbers of children looked after. In terms of proceedings, we've issued the same number, so the matters getting put before the court, we've issued the same number at this point that we did in the full year last year. So if we continue to issue at this rate, we'll have issued a third more than last year. So there are a number of places where we assess our activity, and that is indicating demand in numbers at the front, but also numbers of coming through and complexity associated with a number of challenges. And it's very timely, the question's very timely for us because we've just revisited the demand review that we did in August to the end of, and we'll be looking at it, trying to get it as up to date to the end of November as we possibly could. And there are some associated discussions taking place in relation to that demand. But yeah, challenging time for families. And therefore a challenging time for us.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Neil Thomas has pointed out that it's very easy. It just takes one out-of-county placement to crash the budget, because we all know how very, very expensive that is. Quite some years ago, I think it was before your time, Lance, there were plans to try and get out-of-county placement facility in the Vale of Glamorgan. Does anything ever come of that?
A number of pieces of work have happened in that time. So Rachel will tell me the name, but there's a corporate plan in terms of the capacity for children's placement. So that did result in a number of small units appearing across the Vale. I think what's difficult is that demand changes, and just because it's in the Vale, somebody could be placed from outside of the Vale into it. So it's
well,
not as if
money for us then.
We're not, well, no, sorry, it's not provided by the Vale of Glamorgan. They'll be provided often by the independent sector. So
right.
So ideally, we'll obviously try and place people as children as close to home as possible in most circumstances. It's just unfortunate sometimes we do have to look much further afield.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was just hoping that there were plans to build some sort of facility that we could cater for our own children here. But, you know, if it's not, you know, we can wish for it for Christmas, but...
I think I think just to add to what Lance has said, I think that it's easy to make an assumption that if you build a provision or a set of provisions in the area, that you can meet the needs of all of your children.
Well, I understand that's not possible.
And that's what we found didn't happen. So what Lance is talking about is a tendering exercise essentially that encouraged providers to come into the area to support at that time what our current and anticipated demand would be, and those providers came into the area, and what we found is that worked for a period of time, but then our profile, as Lance is indicating, changed, and we weren't able to meet the needs of those children within those provisions. And
I understand there are many reasons why sometimes you have no alternative but out of county placements. So a report might be quite interesting for new councillors that are not aware of these things. Thank you, Rachel. Does anybody else have any more questions? Are we all happy with the recommendations in the report then? Yep, thank you all very much. Moving on then to agenda item 11, which is in order to gain the view of this committee when considering budget proposals for 21-22 to 2025-26, when forwarding to Resources Scrutiny as the lead scrutiny committee.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the capital report, it's the exact same position as with the revenue. We have no idea what our capital settlement will be next year, so therefore it's very difficult to sort of set a programme really. So what we've done is to sort of carry on with the process as in revenue. So we've looked at the bids, we've scored the bids, they've gone through the evaluation process. So Appendix 2 to the report actually shows you the new bids that we've received. For this committee, totaling 940,000, and Appendix 1 to the report shows the currently already approved capital schemes going forward over the next few years, as they detailed in Appendix 1. So again, it's whether the committee have any sort of comments that they want to support any specific capital bids, or if they have any comments regarding them. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions? You all happy with the recommendations within the report then? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Carolyn, which just leaves me to say I have no items which are urgent, and I'd just like to wish you all a joyous Christmas and a very happy New Year, we hope. Thank you all for your attendance.
Yeah, best wishes for the season, but it's going to be
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I know. Count your blessings. Think about all the good things in your life. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah.